Well, let's bring in the Premier of New Brunswick, Blaine Higgs. He joins me from a studio in Fredericton. Premier Higgs, good to see you again.
Thank you, Peter. Good to be back.
You are pushing to revive the Energy East pipeline that would deliver Alberta oil to the city of St. John for export to foreign markets. What's your plan?
Well, Peter, I'm encouraged by the discussions I've had to date with the premiers in the other provinces, certainly through Ontario and Saskatchewan, Manitoba, and of course we know Alberta's situation. And I'm looking forward to, in the upcoming meeting, to meet with Premier Legault and discuss, you know, what potential might exist in working with Quebec on this issue, because obviously that it's strategic to the success.
Right. Well, let's look at there seem to be a lot of potential roadblocks in the way, and maybe you'll be able to get over them. But TransCanada abandoned the application to build the Energy East pipeline in 2017 after the NEB decided to apply tougher greenhouse gas emission measurements to the pipeline, as you know. That's what the company said. But a lot of people believe there's no longer a business case for that pipeline anymore because of Keystone XL and the eventual development of the Trans Mountain expansion. Are you convinced there's a business case for Energy East?
I am convinced there's a business case, but I also would say that that's probably heightened by the reality of whether we'll see the other projects actually come to fruition. And we have a situation here that is you know, had a whole lot of work done on it, and then rules were invented along the way that made it almost impossible for a private sector to continue. So nothing has really been resolved. I mean, I was out of government for 4 years, and we're still trying to talk about a national energy policy and trying to get our commodity to market. I mean, I have great, you know, I guess concerns or sympathy for Alberta's situation, because they've been funding, you know, many of our provinces for years, including New Brunswick, in terms of transfer payments. And I just think that we got to find a way to bring this to fruition. And it's more than just an energy policy. It's kind of finding a way for provinces to develop a united front, to work together in the best interests of all of us, because we share those revenues that come out of Alberta, and New Brunswick is no exception. And that's why I'm moving forward in some other areas with gas development, because we're sharing revenues from Alberta that are from the same industry that we could develop here. Okay,
but TransCanada, as you know, they've already said they won't be revisiting the Energy East pipeline project. So if they don't want to do it, and it's their pipeline that would have to be converted, at least in part, from gas to oil, what's the way forward? How do you see governments getting together to resurrect this project and make it happen?
So, Peter, I don't get the same message from TransCanada. I appreciate that they are not going to take it on in the absence or in the presence of all the volatility that exists politically. I mean, with Bill C-69 on the table that basically bans pipelines for the future, and with the uncertainty in any sort of direction on how we manage and approve construction, I don't blame them a bit for taking a position of timeout. However, that's why I was proposing a made-in-government solution, so to speak, where you actually create a holding company that applies the application and gets the approval process out of the way. So we actually have an approval, or we don't, but if we are successful, then we go to a pipeline manufacturing pipeline company and say, look, here we have the approval process out of the way. Are you interested in a project that can be a 25, 30-year investment or longer?
So who would assume the cost of that approvals process?
Well, it isn't necessarily a large cost item. The application had been done. However, the National Energy Board had never accepted it. And what that meant is they never started the clock ticking on the 21-month approval process. So here we had a company like TransCanada that had been spent 5 years, $800 million plus, and never had a decision from government, even when a decision would be made. How many private companies can stay in business with that sort of volatility and uncertainty about moving a plan forward?
There was, as you know, there was lots of pushback at the municipal level in the province of Quebec. You think the climate there's changed with François Legault?
Well, I have yet to meet with Premier Legault, and I guess, you know, I'm sure that he's not excited about more rail cars coming through the province, and I think that in the interest of providing a national solution and working together on projects, I'd like to think there's a path forward, and I've yet to meet with him, but I am very much looking forward to that, because we have to find solutions. You know, stalemate on one decision after another through the political process, it's really hurting our country. And we got to fix this.
So you think there's I mean, some of the oil producers, some of the experts said, look, the market's left for an Energy East pipeline, because when it was abandoned, they decided to transfer their shipments to the Keystone XL pipeline to the U.S. coast, U.S. Gulf Coast. But you think, given the uncertainty around the fate of Trans Mountain, for instance, that you think this thing can be revived?
That certainly buoys the opportunity to make this happen, and the tremendous discount that Alberta Oil is taking now to sell through Keystone, and will that expand or not is very much a question. I'm sure that the buyers of our oil are very happy to continue to buy discounted Canadian oil. But I wouldn't be excited about that if it was coming out of our province, and we should recognize that's just not fair. Right here in New Brunswick, we have a buyer for 100,000 barrels a day. In addition, and in Quebec, they would have, I would think, purchase opportunities as well through the refineries there. So let's just not give it up, because nothing has changed in the last 4 years. Our producers are still stranded. Our commodity is still hurting and being tremendously discounted to all of our disadvantage, because we have all benefited from the revenue from those resources.
All right. Yeah, you touched on it, I think, earlier. You and other First Ministers meet with the Prime Minister in Montreal on Friday. That's, in theory, a conversation that's supposed to be around the economy and trade and interprovincial trade. You're going to raise the pipeline issue there?
I am indeed. If we want to talk economy, there couldn't be a bigger item. Our softwood lumber agreement, it seems to have been on hold now, and we're subjected here in the Maritimes with companies that are paying a 20% tariff. And you know, when that tariff, if that continues, and when the price of the forestry, when lumber prices decline, or our differential in pricing between the U.S. dollar and Canadian dollar become closer to par, these companies are going to be out of business. We can't wait for that. We have to have some urgency. What I've always found is government doesn't seem to have any sense of urgency other than between one election and another.
Okay, what's going to happen? You've also decided to join Saskatchewan's court challenge, along with Ontario, against the federal government's carbon tax. What's the case you make against the federal government on the carbon tax issue? And we're going to hear about that at the First Minister's meeting as well.
Yes, we will, and that'll be a topic for sure. We have a carbon plan. We're rolling that out tomorrow as an announcement. I'll be certainly bringing that forward at the meeting, but we roll it out here provincially. Mm-hmm. We don't need to tax people more to meet our missions. We're not backing off on our mission targets at all. So what should be the bigger issue? Is the bigger issue whether we meet our targets and continue to improve, continue to find ways to fund environmentally efficient projects so that we ultimately can just keep an ongoing continuous improvement process, or is it to tax people more for more revenue? And from what I've seen to date, and from every province having a different deal with the federal government, this is all about more revenue for Ottawa to spend. It's not about a plan that improves our environmental condition. So I am based and I am focused on continuing to reduce our emissions.
Okay, so you're gonna have a climate plan that you're gonna unveil on Wednesday, but it's not gonna put a price on carbon, and we've seen that in the province of Ontario, and the government's rejected that, the federal government. So where do you think that leaves you? You'll have a plan that they won't agree with.
Well, let's put it this way, Peter. You know, I know as New Brunswick, by ourselves, the federal government may look at us as 10 seats and say, well, you know, New Brunswick is not a political concern for us. Ontario is a political concern. I would say Saskatchewan, Manitoba, Alberta. So safety in numbers maybe is how I look at this. But my point is, we are disadvantaging our businesses here in New Brunswick by taxing people more, or by taxing the commodities more, so that now we find we're not a competitive jurisdiction because we're surrounded by provinces or the U.S. where they have a different funding model or a different competition model. Right. That's just not fair for our province.
Blaine Higgs, good to speak with you again, and all eyes will be on that First Minister's meeting later this week, and we'll pay attention to your climate plan tomorrow as well. Take care.
Thank you, Peter. Have a good day.